significant challenges for the world economy, but above all for the people that our institution, the IMF, is set to serve.
Depuis 2008, à chaque fois qu'on sort la tête, il y a une autre crise, ils ont su s'affirmer. Et le fonds en particulier, de pouvoir remonter la situation, travailler vis-à-vis des plus vulnérables, essayer d'imposer des règles d'équité et d'égalité et répondre de façon agile, de façon intelligente et de façon appropriée à chaque situation de chaque État qui les souhaite leur assistance.
And that is why I'm so proud that we have chosen to go to Africa, because when we are together, we can overcome any challenge that lies ahead of us. Allons-y à Marrakech.
Allons-y à Marrakech.
It's a big day here at the IMF headquarters in Washington, D.C. I'm Amanda Walker, and I'll be bringing you all the key moments from an action-packed day. We'll have the latest from the Managing Director's Global Policy Agenda press conference, as well as catching up on what's happening around the buildings, the seminars, the talks, all you need to know. Join us for IMF Today at 5 p.m. Eastern. And if you've missed any of it, you can catch all the replays on imf.org.
Find it in yourself to stay. Rita is gone. She ain't coming back in your lifetime. She's gone. She won't wait for you in your next life. Love, she's gone. She ain't coming back in your lifetime. She's gone. She won't wait for you in your next life. No, gone, gone. She's gone. Rita is gone. Gone, gone, gone.
Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome on stage your moderator, Jihad Azur, and the distinguished panelists for this seminar on young entrepreneurs and the digital transformation in the Middle East and North Africa.
Hello, everyone, and thank you for joining us this afternoon for this seminar on young entrepreneurs and digital transformation in the Middle East and North Africa. I'm very happy to be with such a distinguished group of talented people this afternoon to share a very exciting and interesting experience that shed light on the potential of growth and prosperity that this region has. We are today with three distinguished, talented entrepreneurs. Fatma Al-Shinawi is a co-founder and chief strategy officer of Khazna. It's a tech company, it's a fintech startup that utilizes convenient, effective, and smart and secure smartphone-based financial services. She will tell us more about that. She was previously a senior associate in investment banking. It's interesting to move from investment banking to entrepreneurship. Our second speaker is Bilal Al-Mugarbil. He is co-founder and CEO of Max AB. Max AB, it's a digital platform for retailers to manage grocery procurement and delivery. The technology is designed to help shops to anticipate demand and prevent overstocking. He was previously a manager at Careem. Careem, one of the startups that reached now the $1 billion+ of valuation, one of the very interesting startups. Third speaker is Hamza Rakhasham. Hamza is a co-founder and CEO of Sowit Ag Intelligence. It's a startup which utilizes processed satellite image, very complex for me, to help African farmers optimize decisions such as irrigation and fertilizers. I think it's a very, very interesting three cases of how talent can be put at the service of development. Before getting into the details of those three experiences and share lessons that could be used for others and for our work to help countries diversify the economy, I would like to call Deputy Managing Director Bo Lee to share with us introductory remarks. Deputy Managing Director has a long experience in different continents, and at the fund also, he supervises our work in several countries. Bo, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Jihad. Good afternoon. Thank you for joining today's seminar on young entrepreneurs and digital transformation in the Middle East and North Africa. I am honored to introduce this event because it combines three topics of great interest to me and to this institution: digital transformation, entrepreneurship, and youth. And we have an outstanding panel of experts who will discuss these topics in greater detail. Let me briefly give some short remarks to share my observations. Let me start with the digital revolution, which was accelerated by the COVID-19 pandemic and is continuously reshaping our world. The MENA region is no exception. Many businesses and consumers migrated to digital channels for banking, entertainment, and more. Policymakers have set ambitious targets to digitally transform economies. The UAE, for example, aims to double the contribution of the digital economy to over 20% of non-oil GDP by 2031. This is not surprising. Our research shows that closing digital divides can help countries boost growth and productivity and build resilience against shocks. We are seeing this already. During the pandemic, digitally enabled firms and industries outperformed peers. While the case for digital transformation is clear, there is still a lot of untapped potential in the MENA region. Smartphones are widely used, but digital payments and e-commerce are still in early stages. The region still consumes more innovations than it produces. There are also large disparities in digital adoption in the region, especially between low-income countries and GCC countries. So, what can be done to unlock this potential and ramp up digital transformation? The key, we think, is the region's young entrepreneurs who will determine the future. Young people constitute more than half of the population across MENA. They can rapidly adopt new technologies, becoming not only consumers, but also innovators and entrepreneurs. But young people face challenges in launching and growing their businesses. To support the digital transformation, countries must address these challenges and create an enabling environment for new ideas and digital solutions. Several MENA countries have taken positive steps to support young entrepreneurs, particularly in the fintech sector, through incubators and regulatory sandboxes. But more can be done to keep up with the evolving digital landscape and foster entrepreneurship. Here are 4 ways to create an enabling environment. First, enhance countries' digital infrastructure to improve access to information and technology. Second, upgrade digital literacy and upskill the young workforce to meet employers' needs. Third, alleviate the financing constraints that small and medium enterprises face to adopt new technologies. And finally, increase adoption of new technologies by streamlining regulations and enhancing the legal environment. We should also look for regional cooperation opportunities to promote digital transformation. Young entrepreneurs are well placed to tap customers, talents, and supply chains from across the region, but only if institutional and regulatory barriers are addressed. I am delighted that today we have with us some of the region's young entrepreneurs who are successfully leveraging digital technologies across different sectors of the economy. Let's hear from them on how our economies can take advantage of the digital revolution. Thank you. Enjoy.
Thank you very much, Deputy Managing Director, for those inspiring introductory remarks that will help us shape our discussion. Our discussion will revolve around 3 segments. We will discuss first the opportunities, and opportunities are many. 3 years ago, when COVID outbreak hit many of our countries, we saw that several of young entrepreneurs led some of the very interesting developments that helped us deal with the COVID crisis. Therefore, digital transformation has been accelerating. We see more and more innovation in all industries, in finance, in education, in services. And technology is also now playing a more and a bigger role in the region. I would like to hear your views, you who are chartering the future of the region. Where do you see opportunities? And how do you see digital transformation in the MENA region? And second question related to it, you as young entrepreneurs, how do you see yourself in those opportunities? If you project yourself 5, 10 years from now, how do you see yourself shaping up the future of our region and leading the course? This is definitely a question that we are starting with you today. And in our road to Marrakesh, where we will have our annual meetings, we will keep asking the same question to the youth from different countries in the region in order to understand where the priorities are, how we and others can work in order to promote additional inclusion and give more role and space to the young generation. And ladies first, Fatma, give me a bit your views on that. Where do you see opportunities?
Sure. First of all, thank you so much for having me here. It's really an honor. So just to take a step back and just sort of a flashback, 4 years ago when we came together as co-founders, for us, the problem was that we're solving for. There's a big underbanked population in Egypt, and we thought it was the right time for 2 reasons. The first was the regulatory push for financial inclusion, and the second was how connected our target segment became to the internet through mobile phone and smartphone penetration. And I think they tie together in the aspect of digitization, because the regulator from one side realized that now is a good time given how connected the world is and how connected the Egyptian population is, and the priority, and just like you mentioned, how do we prioritize that, and thought this was a good time to start tackling this issue. And what happened was sort of creating this idea that let's give the fintechs the space to exist and to come up with new solutions that have not been introduced in the market before. And let's push the incumbent to partner up with these fintechs. And that's something that we've seen progress throughout the past 4 years since we started thinking about the problem and how do we solve it. So just to give you a sense, when we did our first partnership with a financial institution, it took us a certain amount of time. And then we recently signed a big partnership with another financial institution, and it took us almost half the time to get through the pilot phase, because they understand at this point the need to partner up with other organizations and the need to work with the fintechs and change the mindset and come up with new solutions for consumers. So I think we've really seen the market evolve in those past 3-4 years.
Thank you very much. Very straightforward. Bilal, any views?
So basically, the way I looked at the opportunities in the Middle East is, for you to start a good business or a big business, you need to be solving a big problem, right? And in the Middle East, there's plenty of them, right? So the more problems there are, the more opportunities there are to actually create something meaningful out of it, right? And in Maksab, we tried to look at what the biggest opportunities are. So we looked at the GDP of our region. 1/3 of it is retail. Half of that is food retail alone, right? So we figured out how can we use technology to actually solve that problem. And the problem was that that supply chain was extremely fragmented and multi-layered, right? So a case of rice will exchange hands up to 6 times before it goes to the retailer, who will then sell it to the end consumer, right? And we tried to build a digital platform to allow these retailers to order directly from the manufacturers through our platform. But not to digress, I'm sorry, like the way we look at it is the bigger the problems, the bigger the opportunities. You can always use technology to leapfrog and exponentially solve these problems with very limited infrastructure that we have. So how do we get more out of a warehouse, right, using technology? How do we have very limited amount of roads relatively, right? So how can we push more inventory and more products out of those roads? So we need to use technology to optimize those things as well.
Thank you very much. Bilal, when you face challenges, you turn them into opportunities. And this is very much the mindset that I think we all need in addressing some of the regional issues. Hamza, share us a bit your views on that, how you see the opportunities growing, and Based on your experience, what could you tell us?
So for us, as a company that provides data to agriculture, to farmers, it was a convergence actually of two main trends. The first was the market. Definitely, we couldn't accept that Morocco or Tunisia were producing 2 tons per hectare of cereals, where France was producing 7 or India 5. It means there was a huge gap in terms of productivity at farm level, despite very strong investment and infrastructure effort over which these countries spend billions of dollars in order to equip the farms and the farmers with the right irrigation system. So how can we accept that 14 kilometers from Morocco, we have olive farmers in Spain that produce 7 tons per hectare, where our farmers do produce 1, and they are actually serving the same market at the end of the day, but building very different P&Ls. The second was a technology trend that was very massive, the use of satellite imagery. 5 years ago, when we were buying 1 acre of satellite data from Digital Globe or Planet, we were buying it $80. Now it costs less than 10 cents. It means that the availability of high quality data that could empower farmers in better decision makings, how much water should I irrigate, when should I harvest, what quantity of fertilizer can I use, has become widely available and can be made then accessible to farmers in the region. Farmers that are facing very tough environmental conditions with the climate change and the drought that is currently observed, and that make technology even more critical. Even those that were perceiving technology as a nice-to-have component are switching into it today because simply they do not have the choice whether they use it and save 20 to 25% of water or whether they stop farming. This opportunity was also not only on the farming level, but the data analytics that we consolidated is also today used by leading banks, such as the Crédit Agricole, to assess farmers' creditworthiness because they know what the farmer is doing and better assess the risk and performance of the farmer, or simply by governments that dedicate massive subsidy program and need to know what's happening at the farm level in order to capitalize on this effort.
Thank you very much. Very happy to see that we did not only discuss startup opportunities, but we discussed access to finance, addressing issues of informality, and food security. Therefore, small opportunities or small initiatives could have also big impact. Thank you very much. Okay, now we discussed opportunities, but I'm sure, guys, you faced a lot of challenges. I'm quite sure that you had to fight hard in order to get where you are here today. For us, as an institution that deals with structural reforms, macroeconomic issues, also those issues are important. How, based on your experience, what could you share with us, some of the key challenges that you had to face, and give us some tips how you addressed those, and what would be your message for policymakers in dealing with those issues? Again, ladies first.
Thank you. I think early on there was a big challenge of educating the market on what we're doing, given that it was a relatively newer solution to what they were used to, whether the market is our partners, whether it's financial institutions, whether it's potential debt investors, and I think that took us quite some time. But I think we're beyond this phase of education, and we're more looking into, at this point, I think the main challenge that we see in our market is access to local debt. Because at the end of the day, you know, whether it's the DFIs or the local banks, they're still a bit used to certain funding specific in certain projects that they're familiar with. And now we're trying to bring them, get that through that level of education, where we're trying to educate them about what we're doing and that we're building a sustainable and a profitable business model that is actually available for that investment opportunities. So I think that's, we're at this phase of educating the market locally around this area.
Thank you very much. You're raising an important question, which is financial literacy, especially for those who are in informality. Could you tell us a bit more on other issues, like, for example, infrastructure, financial infrastructure or technology infrastructure? Was it an issue in your case or no?
I think we've built the product around the infrastructure, the existing infrastructure, and when we started until this day, the infrastructure is relatively well established in Egypt, so it allows us to function our products pretty seamlessly from a user experience. And we've seen it improve over the past few years, especially I think with COVID, this has really accelerated the agenda around improving the infrastructure and the payment railways, for example, in Egypt and across the Middle East in general. So that has been sort of a tailwind for us as opposed to really a challenge.
Thank you. Let me turn to Hamza. Very interesting, your example, and I'm sure that will resonate with many of our people working on fragile situations. Also, when you look at the main challenges that you faced, tell us a bit about those.
Yes, of course. I think the first challenge we really faced was cultural. It means that talent were not believing that startup could really make it. So very hard to secure talent when you're facing corporates in an environment where there is no real inspiring models and and startups succeeding to a certain stage of financing in Morocco as comparison to Egypt, for example. But also cultural in the sense that even in the beginning, corporates or institutions were perceiving startups as a youth doing something somewhere that was quite nice to have, but not really fundamental. And I believe that this cultural challenge was I would say the hardest one to face because you need to build trust, not only with your customers, farmers on a daily basis, but also with the partners, with the institutions, with the corporates, with the talents. You need to build trust with everyone. And it was quite challenging for us in an environment that is not startup driven, that there is no real strong financing in which an ecosystem is massive, to kind of convince all of these partners to involve and work with us. And this kind of cultural challenge over which you need to build an ecosystem where startups are trusted to be providers, to be service providers, to be partners, is also generating multiple other challenges. So regulatory, because institutions do not really feel the need to act on startups, because this is not a massive flow they have on their agenda. So at the end of the day, there is no real incentive to change it, so to make it, to soften the regulation, for example, to make it easier for startups to make transactions in different currencies because they simply manage teams in different countries. And also from a fiscal and tax perspective, over which not having a special regime and being considered as a small or medium-sized company was not really reflecting how you build your balance sheet, which is investing massively in technology with a long cycle over which you need capital along the way until you deliver. So we felt there was a disconnect between the need of a startup, the need for this startup to be scalable, to be financed, to build trust, and the reality of the ecosystem it operated in. It evolved over the last few years, but the startup is still competing at the global stage. So if at the end of the day, I cannot build what I am building in Morocco, I will build it somewhere else. And that's the reality because I need to serve my customer wherever I can, being there or somewhere else.
Hamza, let me ask you follow-up questions. You're talking about scaling up. This is usually one of the main issues that many of our startups usually face. Entering is not easy, but what is the most challenging is how to scale up, because this requires different type of partnership, different type of capital. Are you in this phase, or do you envisage to scale up? And what are the challenges that you are facing or you could face when you want to scale up?
Yes, so we are currently scaling up. The services are available in 6 countries. So farmers in Ethiopia, Côte d'Ivoire, Tunisia use our service on a daily basis. More than 100,000 hectares are surveyed and helping these farmers improve their productivity. But there are 2 challenges we are facing mainly when scaling up. The first is as the business grows, the organizational structure of the company needs to evolve. So you need to make this organization ready for getting more financing and for growing healthily, which means, of course, when you are looking for VC funds, which means making your structure evolve, maybe putting your holding somewhere else, which means getting the company fit for absorbing more capital and ensuring there is minimal risk for investors so that they get the return they expect. And this is very hard because once you set a certain framework, even though the business and the revenue are doing very well, if you decide the day after to go to the Netherlands because all the investors need you to be in the Netherlands so that they can get the framework they want, it's very complex, especially when you are in our economies. The second aspect of it, when scaling up that is very complex, is that we work in countries, at least Morocco, Tunisia, Côte d'Ivoire, where there are no digital highways. It means you are building the solution, but you are also building the road you are driving on, which means when you are serving a farmer, you need not only to provide the service, but you need to provide the end user finance so that this farmer can use your service and finance it. And you need maybe also to provide the satellite connection so that he can connect and get this data. It means that the work is more important when scaling up and that you need to be aware that you are not simply iterating or accelerating a business that is quite streamlined and straightforward, but need to be completely aware about what does it take to get these solutions working on wide scale.
Hamza, how old are you?
31.
Bilal, okay, share us a bit the challenges that you had to face, or you are maybe still facing.
Yeah, so we're in this scale-up part of the business, as you have mentioned, this is where it gets really, really tricky, right? And the problem about the Middle East is that there is not that many companies that have scaled when it comes to technology. I actually had the pleasure of working with one of those ones, which was Kareem, which got acquired by Uber 3 years ago. But before that, we had zero role models, right? There was not that many companies to see, okay, we can be like this, right? And that's a big challenge specifically when it comes to fundraising and talent. And if you don't get these right, you don't have a business, or it's very difficult to build a business without the right talent and the right investors that support you to the next level. And because, again, there is no role models, or there's not that many companies that have made it that far, it's very hard to actually do both of those. And the third one would be the capital markets. So at the end of the day, you need money to scale these businesses. And then these investors would need to find a way to exit, right? So when the capital markets are not very mature in our part of the world, it makes it very difficult, right? Yeah, specifically, when you have to educate the entire market on tech companies and how they operate and how you can list a company that's not doing any profits yet. And you get in this dilemma where, okay, do we list in the US, in the NASDAQ, that understands technology very well, but doesn't understand the region as much, right? Or do you list in the region, which obviously understand the region, but is not very accustomed to technology companies? So this is, I think, the biggest challenge we are right now as we approach the scale that we're in right now.
Bilal, are you experiencing what we started to see in the tech finance, that with the increase in interest rates recently, that financial support is drying up, or you are still fine?
Yes, this is definitely the case, and it's even overcomplicated in North Africa or in Egypt, to be specific. So the markets are drying up globally. They're double drying in the Middle East, specifically given the currency situations that we have as Egypt, to be specific. There's definitely complications there, but again, the good days will not continue forever, right? And when you're building a resilient business, you have to figure out a way to absorb these turnarounds in the economy, and that's how we try to build our business in a resilient way, so that when markets turn around, it is not detrimental to the business, and we use that time to make sure that we are going to be ready to scale once the markets come back.
Are you cash flow positive or not yet?
We are not profitable yet, but we're getting there.
Excellent. Okay, thank you very much. Let me move to the third this topic of our discussion. You're here at the International Monetary Fund, and coming here, you have to discuss policies. Therefore, we have to discuss institutional reforms. What are the priorities? Again, those are very interesting and very encouraging cases. And the first question to you is, here we have initiatives that can be scaled and they are scalable, but this requires to have a national priorities with certain number of institutional and regulatory priorities. How and what government should do, on one hand, to facilitate and maybe be less heavy in terms of regulation, and how and what they can do to support? Do you have any initiatives that you could share with us that you went through that you think are useful to emulate? Or do you have examples of things not to do or to correct? Let me start with you.
So I think all tech companies, wherever they are in the world, they want to be tolerated, not regulated, right? So basically, regulation all over the world will always slow technology companies down, right? So you'd always actually try to avoid being properly regulated till the very end. And we faced this in the ride-hailing business. It wasn't regulated neither in the US, nor definitely it was in Egypt, right? But that open dialogue that we had with the government helped us eventually figure out a way to actually regulate this eventually, right? So I think an open dialogue, and having it very clear tolerance to technology companies, and again, tolerate them more than figure out a way to regulate them the sooner, actually delay the regulation as much as possible, have been proven to be very healthy for technology companies, whether here or back home. But obviously that means that there has to be a very continuous conversations for them to actually understand what you're trying to do. How can that fit in their own strategy for the country? Makes us eventually get there. But when the dialogue is not there, that's where the problems start, because you're solving the problem in a very different way. Example, when it comes to financial inclusion, you're doing things that the banks would not do, right? So that's obviously, there's no specific or clear framework for them to know how to absorb that yet, right? So without that open discussions, it seems like you're not doing something legal, right? I'm obviously doing something in the gray area, let's call it this way. And we are trying to legitimize that business, but we need to figure it out together, how to rewrite laws as quickly as possible to accommodate for new technologies.
How many people are working with you?
We are now 4,000 people in the organization.
4,000 people?
Yes.
4,000 people startup. This is very impressive. And what is the profile of those people?
So basically we have, we operate our own supply chain. So obviously we have a lot of workers inside the warehouses and in the fleet. And then in our HQ, we have 500 people, where 200 of them are pretty much engineers, software engineers and product managers and data scientists. And the rest are commercial teams, operations and finance. Now, again, going back to the tricky part is building technology solution for emerging markets is very different than building it in San Francisco, right? So where are we going to get the right profiles? It actually falls down to attitude, right? There are people that are quite knowledgeable. They have the bandwidth and the brain power to solve complex problems, yet are humble enough to know that whatever they were doing in San Francisco will not work in Cairo, right? And you have to figure out other ways to solve these problems. So those are the people we look for.
And are you facing challenges to find the right talents?
I think it's by far the most difficult thing I've ever done in my life. Finding the right talent that would fit our culture and our way of doing things, and building a technology company in North Africa, to be specific.
Going back to my question again, we are here a bit obsessed by policies. I see that time is running, but I think it's interesting. In terms of education or in terms of capacity development, is it something that you feel that the market is providing you with the right talents, or there are reforms to be done on the education side?
So actually in Egypt, what's quite interesting is that when it comes to junior engineers, we have actually a very solid base in Egypt. Now, the education system is actually, or specifically, the good thing is now you don't need to go to school to be a good developer, right? So the world has fixed that problem for us.
Because they will stop going to school. Yes.
So the world have solved that problem for us, right? And we're leveraging this, and we're actually teaching a lot of our junior engineers courses online to to catch up with the rest of the world. But so that when it comes to junior engineering talent, that's not the real issue. When it comes to senior talent, again, because where am I going to hire them from in the Middle East, right? There's not that many tech companies where these guys would have existed and learned a lot of stuff. So we have a good, alhamdulillah, diaspora outside of Egypt that for one reason or the other would want to come back. It's either family reasons or whatever. So we actually leverage this pool of talent and try and convince them to come back to us. Now, the tricky part is that they would never move back for one company. There has to be an ecosystem, because what if they move back and they don't like the company? They want to make sure that there are other startups that they can go to or other technology companies that they can go to. And this is where building an ecosystem becomes extremely, extremely important, because you cannot do it on your own, right? So the government, from a policy-making perspective, should do whatever it can to make sure that we have an ecosystem in place that would allow this talent to come back or get them excited to come back so that they can solve problems in their home markets.
Thank you very much. Fatma, what are your policy recommendations?
I think Bilal summed it up pretty nicely for Egypt. I think we're, just for perspective, we're like a major exporter of tech talent in specific. So it's easy to find the juniors, and then they go to Berlin, they go to San Francisco, they go to all different parts of the world. So the challenge is to attract them back to the market. I try to be optimistic, and I think we've had several cases over the past couple of years with the ecosystem developing, with startups raising bigger rounds and gaining attention, especially with international investors of us successfully being able to bring Egyptians back home. But I think there's a lot of work to be done on that side. I think also for the different regulators in the market, just the understanding that innovation precedes regulation. Luckily for us as a fintech, a regulator understands that, and the dialogue is always open around the kind of solutions that we're providing and them trying to understand what we're doing instead of limit what we're doing. I think eventually, that especially in the fintech space, the regulations will get there, and it's hard to expect not to be regulated given the sensitivity of what we're doing. But it's good that the regulator understands that this is we're trying to bring new concepts to the market that have been done elsewhere, but we're importing them and localizing them in Egypt. And the same across the entire region. Like you look at Saudi Arabia, they're doing the same thing. You look at the UAE, there's also a big dialogue between the regulator and the fintechs. And I hope that happens across all the different industries because it really makes a difference.
Thank you very much. I see that you're becoming regional. Hamza, last word. What are the policy recommendations for regulators, also for the financial community, for us too?
So in 2018, we benefited from two policies that were very positive in Morocco. The first was a policy led by the World Bank, which is called Innov Invest, which actually allowed World Bank to partner with local Fed, the Central Warranty Fund, and to ensure seed funding for startups. So this was a great initiative, and we wouldn't have been, it wouldn't have been a company in Morocco without this initiative, because without financing, you can do pretty much. Probably there is something to do around ensuring that when the company is at later stage, Series A, Series B, it gets funding, and it doesn't get a mess around restructuring everything so that the company can get funding, despite it shows the right metrics. So first is ensuring that financing flows at different stages, not only at the seed or the Series A1, in order to ensure to build sustainably these ventures. The second one was a policy called Tahfiz. It was a policy for ensuring employment with very minimal tax on employing young staff, and especially engineers. And recently during COVID, there was a policy in exonerating 3 years of tax revenue for new hires. These policies are very important. Each time there is one policy like that, you can be sure that we are hiring cohorts of engineers, because it's a stress we have less in our P&L, and that enable us to go further in terms of accelerating our development. And I would say that probably what needs to be done, especially in Morocco, is to ensure that there is more flexibility for startups when getting to the currency authority, when getting to the tax authority, when deciding to flip from a country to another, with, of course, a commitment to get back and to repatriate the proceeds as a currency that the country can enjoy, but there is more flexibility, and definitely a startup couldn't be considered as a small and medium-sized company. Not only because it's really still looking for a scalable and profitable business model and still investing very, very highly on this, but also because it needs to operate as a global stage. Because competition is global and markets are. So probably there are things to do around this tax currency in order to ensure startups can keep growing along the way and not get to a ceiling over which they feel trapped in terms of financing because money is trapped somewhere else, but also in terms of getting to other markets because there is no flexibility in managing international transactions.
Thank you very much. Time was running very fast. I need to conclude because we still have only a few seconds. I want to thank the team of the fund who has prepared this session. It's one of the most exciting sessions that I have participated in. This is also, for your information, one of our first steps on the road to Marrakesh, where we will have our annual meetings. And during those annual meetings, we will discuss inclusion. We will discuss opportunities. And thank you for your very interesting, I would say, ideas and views, not only on your experience, but also on what needs to be done. Ladies and gentlemen, Fatma, Bilal, Hamza, I would like to thank you. This is the future of the Middle East, here in front of you. Thank you. Thank you.